Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Katie Glazer. I am the Head of Engagement at the Institute for Research in Schools. And today I'm very pleased to be joined by colleagues from Medicines Discovery Catapult. They're joining us this British Science Week to share some information about what they do, what the organisation does, and how medicines are made. I've mentioned that the chat is available, so please, if you think of any questions while they're presenting, type those in and I will come to those towards the end of the session. And other than that, I think I will hand over to you, Nicola.
Brilliant. Thank you, Katie. Okay, so hi, everyone. It's great to have an opportunity to speak to you about our great organisation. So this afternoon, myself, Emily and Rob are going to tell you a little bit about ourselves, what we do, and how to discover new medicines. So just to kick us off, we're going to each introduce ourselves to you. We're going to say what we do at the company and how it fits into the wider picture of the company. And I'll ask each of us will do that. And then we'll just talk to you a little bit about our background, why we went into science, why we enjoy working in science, just to really sort of set the scene and let you get to know us a bit before we delve into medicines discovery. So my role is as Chief Strategy Officer at our company. And what that means is that I get to work on what are the big problems we're trying to solve, who should we be working with. So I get an opportunity to really shape the focus of our company based on what we think the biggest challenges are within the development of new drugs for ill health. So I'll pass on to Emily. She can tell us who she is and what she does.
Thanks, Nicola. So my name is Emily Offer. I'm Head of Cellular Sciences at Medicines Discovery Catapult. And what I do in the company is I lead a team of lab-based scientists who are working in the laboratory, looking at how different medicines work and which diseases they might be suitable for, and then trying to provide evidence for those. I guess one of the parts of the introduction, we were going to talk a little bit about ourselves and why we got interested in science. So I can give you a little bit of background to me. So growing up, I was always really interested in how things worked. A bit of a self-confessed geek, I guess, that even sort of under 10, I had a crystal growing kit and a meteorology kit to see how different changes in weather, to monitor different changes in weather, as well as a little mini microscope. But I was always also really interested in, why people get sick and why they get better. And so I always thought I wanted to be a doctor, but as I moved through school, I had some really influential teachers at school, particularly a really brilliant biology teacher who got me really excited about science in general. But I also still really loved other subjects, particularly art and design, and I really love the creative outlet. So I struggled to know what I really wanted to do, as a career, I guess. But with that real interest in understanding, wanting to know how things work, and with some support from my teachers, I decided to move on and do further education at university, looking at in this science area. And then, so as part of my university degree, I had an option to take a year in industry, is what we called it. So it was a placement 1 year where I could work in a company who were developing medicines. And to me, that just made it all make sense. It suddenly became clear about what I was doing. I learned a bit about the theory, but actually seeing it in a practical sense sort of got me really excited about that and working with some really sort of interesting people. So I went on to do a little bit more work in university before then moving on to work at different companies. And I guess to me, thinking about what makes me excited and interested about science and why I love working in this area and love it as a career is because it's basically because it's fun. I work with really interesting people every day, with different ideas coming from different backgrounds. Both Nicola, Robert and I all have very different backgrounds, but bringing those different minds together really helps solve problems. And so, yeah, I also get to use that creative outlet that I really liked, as well as really being interested in the science. So that's just a little bit of background to me, and I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about what inspires me about working in medicines discovery. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Emily. Rob.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm Rob Bevan. I work as a data scientist at MDC. And I'm really interested in how we can use data and AI to improve the medicines discovery process. So I had a slightly different route into science. I did a physics degree at university, not necessarily because I knew I wanted to pursue a career in science, just enjoyed it at school, was quite good at it. It's one of those degrees that at the end of it, you kind of keep your options open career-wise. So I wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I was 17, 18 years old, kind of kicked the can down the road for years. That's fine. So I really enjoyed coding at university. They taught us that as part of our degree. It's really important in science, physics. I enjoyed the maths elements as well. I wasn't actually very good at the kind of hands-on experimentation, not really my skill set. So when I finished my university degree, I ended up working in software development because I like the coding and it's kind of intellectually stimulating, which for me is important in my career, get to use my brain. So I did that for a couple of years and then kind of reflected and thought, this is good, it's intellectually stimulating, but I kind of really would like to work on these big problems that, if you solve them, then you have a really positive impact. And that's kind of what led me to switch back to a career in science and in particular medicines discovery. So those are kind of two things I really like about working in science. It's interesting, challenging problems and make a big impact. But there are other things too. For example, you get to learn a lot about lots of different areas of science when you work with in scientific kind of industry. We have our colleagues results regularly, and you get to kind of learn about this cutting edge stuff from experts in their field, which is really cool. I think you find that scientists are really passionate about their particular area of expertise and love talking about the things they're interested in, which is, it can be like a very nice environment to be surrounded with colleagues that are really interested in what they do and really excited about it. It just kind of can be infectious and kind of lift your mood as well and make you more optimistic too. So those kind of bit about my background and what I like about science, how I got to where I am today.
Fantastic. So you've got a physics graduate, a biology graduate, and I'm a chemist. So when I was making my decisions way back when I was 17, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I liked chemistry. I was good at chemistry. And really the main focus I had was to get a good job in the end. And so as I started getting to understand more of what chemistry was, I actually, to borrow Emily's scientist geek, I realized that I loved organic chemistry. It made a lot of sense. It was like a pattern. It was just a lovely puzzle. And I enjoyed the fact that you could make molecules. And ultimately that enjoyment of being able to make molecules has taken me all the way through to working in medicines discovery, where we're making medicines of the future. And what I enjoy about working in science is, you've got a lovely job, working with lovely people, solving problems that make a difference. You can be really proud of what you're doing. And I think all of us at Medicines Discovery Catapult are really proud of what we're doing and also feel really lucky to be working for a company like this. So we'll move on to what is Medicines Discovery Catapult. We've mentioned it quite a few times. So Catapult is part of the government's network of innovation agencies. So there are 9 catapults. And what we're doing is we look at how we can support high tech, high innovation sectors in the UK to be successful. So Catapult's got catapults looking at high value manufacturing, so the manufacturing of the next generation of aeroplanes, to how do we harness space technology, to ourselves who are looking at how do we create the medicines we need today and the medicines we need in the future. So everything we are here to do is to try and speed up the development of new medicines to try and make a difference to people living with diseases. And we work in partnership with anyone really that's got a great idea. So we work with people within the NHS, we work with people within universities, charities, industry. And so it's a very collaborative approach to taking a good idea and doing everything we can to try and see that idea through. Can this nugget of a great idea ultimately end up in a medicine that we'll be using in 5-10 years' time? So that's us. There's about 140 of us. We're based in a beautiful science park just south of Manchester. And we are a happy bunch, if you can see that. You can see the smiles from here. So I want to just move on to talk a little bit about what is medicines discovery. So medicines discovery is the development of new drugs to treat disease. And when we think about that, it's a vast subject, and there's lots of different drugs to treat lots of different diseases. So if you just think about some of the drugs you might know, there's paracetamol for pain relief, or you might know it as the strawberry syrupy version, which is Calpol, which is what we would use for kids, and the white tablet for adults. There's other examples of drugs. If you think of friends and family with asthma, for example, you'll have seen them taking their nebulizers, so they're puffers, to take drugs that can help control that condition, all the way through to things like antibiotics, which are drugs like penicillin, for example, which are used to treat infectious diseases, chest infections, for example. So lots of different drugs for lots of different conditions. And it's interesting to think about, well, where did they come from? How have we got this lovely set of medicines? And they come from different places. So traditionally, you've got drugs that came from hundreds of years ago from the natural world. So anti-malarial drugs from tree barks. The story of the original identification of penicillin. Amazing Scottish chemist who was working with bacteria and noticed that through a leftover piece of mouldy bread or a sneeze, I don't quite know what the story is. Anyway, there was a mold that was growing, and he discovered that the bacteria wouldn't grow anywhere close to that mold, and what the active ingredient within the mold was penicillin, essentially. So we discovered that sort of serendipitous. So what we want to talk to you about is modern medicine, how we go about understanding how we're going to create medicines of the future. And as I said, there are lots of medicines out there, but there are many, many diseases that we still cannot treat effectively. And there are new diseases emerging as we all get older and live longer. So the ambition to get ahead and keep generating better medicines for our future is really important to us. So I'm going to hand over to Emily and Rob now, who are going to actually talk to you about how are medicines created.
Thanks, Nick. So I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about, how medicines are created. So I guess one thing to mention is that actually developing new medicines is really difficult. We're all very different. Patients are very different. Diseases are very different. And also how we respond to medicines is different too. So if you take an example like COVID-19, if there were 10 people in a room exposed to that virus, not everybody would get the virus. And then how ill people get in response to that virus would be very different. So it's really, when we're thinking about developing new medicines, we firstly need to understand the disease, but also understand the patient. And those two things are interconnected, but also have different problems. And so we also have, as Nicola mentioned, we have many treatments and medicines that already work pretty well, but there are lots of diseases that we still have that don't have any treatment for. And even when we do have treatment, so if you take an example like hay fever, so you might be aware of something. If you have hay fever, you might be aware of taking an antihistamine, which would stop your runny nose, maybe stop your itchy eyes. But if you stop taking that and you don't take it the next day, but you get exposed to grass pollen, you still have hay fever. So you are treating the symptoms, and the drug does work for that, but it doesn't treat the underlying disease. So when we're developing new medicines, we think about those two different aspects as well. Sometimes we really want to treat the root cause, and sometimes it's enough to treat the symptoms, and ideally, I guess we want to treat both. So thinking about every idea for a drug, it's because it's so difficult, and because there are lots of these different interconnecting factors, actually every single idea for a new drug doesn't convert to an actual drug. So and I think on average it's around, for every 250 ideas, only one of those will become a drug that we can actually end up buying. And it takes a very long time from that initial idea all the way through to actually developing that into a medicine. It can take around 15 years, which is a huge amount of time. And I think that's because we need to learn a lot along the way. There are lots of different elements of that drug discovery, that medicines discovery process. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. But there are also, because of all those failures and those things that need investment in terms of time and money to investigate the ideas, but don't come to fruition, then that's why developing new medicines costs such a lot of money. But you know, there are positives as well, and you know, we are getting better at this, and the timeline to developing new medicines is getting shorter, and part of what we do at Medicines Discovery Catapult is really to try and support that, and try and understand why those medicines fail, and try and make that process better. So I'm now going to talk about the drug discovery process. So as I mentioned before, like, when we start thinking about how to create a new medicine, we really need to understand the disease and understand the patients, and that really underpins how we start the process. So if we take an example like cancer, so we know that, you know, what the effect cancer might have in the body, and we know that we want to destroy or kill the cancer cells, but we also know that we don't want to harm our own self cells. So what we would do if we had an idea for a new drug for cancer, what we would do is we would design what we call an assay or an experiment or a test. All these words are interchangeable, and we would develop that in the laboratory. We would use cells from a cancer and test to see if that drug, that medicine that we have an idea of, actually kills those cells. But also we would think about looking at monitoring the safety aspect of it, and that it doesn't kill our own cells. So then this is an iterative design process. We would, you know, look, if it works a bit, we might make some changes in that medicine, and then try it again, and keep working on that to get better and better. And as we do that, we learn more about the disease we're trying to treat, but also what we need in the medicine to kind of make it better. And then this kind of problem solving and this iterative rework is really what underpins what we do in medicines discovery. And then so we do a lot of work in the lab, and then but the real sort of test of the matter is actually testing that in a human and a patient. And this is what we call clinical studies or clinical trials. And this is where we start to take all the testing that we've done in the lab and test it in the patient. And at this stage, it can be tricky. We can think that something works very well in the laboratory, but when we actually test it in the patient, it might not work, or it might work in just a small number of patients. And so this is where we can really learn a lot as well. And so sometimes drugs can fail at that point, or sometimes we can take them back a few steps and think, okay, well, it didn't work brilliantly in this, but in these patients, but we learned this, and we'll apply that so that we can make the drug a little bit better, and then we could take it through the process again. And this is where data can really help us. So I'm going to sort of hand over to Rob, who's going to talk to us a little bit about how that aspect can influence drug discovery.
Yeah, so as Emily mentioned, creating a new medicine can be really expensive and take a really long time, because there's loads of failure. Lots of potential medicines fail at some point along this pipeline that she's just explained to us. So we can use data and computational methods, including AI, to kind of help us prioritize sort of medicine candidates that we think are less likely to fail. We can't predict. Definitely, they won't. This won't fail. But if we can kind of help prioritize that, then we can potentially add value, speed things up, reduce failure rates. I mean, there are a few or lots of different ways we can use AI and computational methods in drug discovery. So, for example, we can try to predict how well our potential medicine might interact with what we call a disease target. You can think of a disease target as some biological thing that is associated with this disease that we want our medicine to interact with in a way that will affect the disease and make it better, basically reduce symptoms or kind of kill the disease. So you can think of, if we can build an AI system that can do that, then we can maybe prioritize those medicine candidates that we think are more likely to interact with our target. And we can even use it to kind of identify these targets in the first place, so improve our understanding of a disease. So a medicines discovery scientist, if they want to learn about a new disease area and what targets are associated with the disease, they'll read some scientific papers, which is a good approach. There's lots of scientists doing great work publishing their research, but it can be challenging because there's so much of it, and there's so much of it coming out all the time. Lots of people doing lots of work, so we can use AI systems similar to ChatGPT to kind of effectively read large amounts of literature and extract the information we're interested in, and then we can use that information to kind of make it easier to learn which targets are associated with different diseases. So those are just a couple of examples of how we can use data and AI to improve the process. There are lots of interesting companies popping up kind of working in these areas in recent years, and I think it's probably only going to grow. So if you are interested in coding and this sort of thing, then there may well be a job for you in a few years. Yeah, and it's important to note actually that these are never going to replace scientists. We definitely need to keep this pipeline, and it's kind of, as Emily mentioned, this iterative procedure where we kind of fail and learn things. These tools are definitely going to be part of that. They're not going to replace scientists. Yeah, that's just kind of a brief little overview of how we can use data and AI in drug discovery.
Fantastic. Okay, so with that, let's talk about careers in science and how you would move into a career in science in something like Medicines Discovery. So I'm just going to start with just making the point that you don't need to be a scientist to have an impact and work in science. All these different skill sets are required to help a scientific organization be successful. We have scientists in the lab, but we have all these other really important aspects of different skills. So whether you want to be a project manager, go into marketing, be a scientist in the lab, or be a scientist outside of the lab, if this is an area that sparks enthusiasm, then there's a career for you in this area. But maybe just ask the team here, what are the different routes? Let's say it was science. So Emily, do you want to talk to us about some of the different routes into a career in science?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean there are lots of different ways. So I mean, I guess you could take the potentially the typical route, or you might think would be the typical route. So you study science at university and then understand what you might like to specialize in, and then go and on to look for a job in that way. There are apprenticeships. I've worked at companies before where we've taken apprentices straight from school, actually from A-levels, and started in the workplace. You might have heard of apprenticeships in areas like electricians and plumbing and things like that, but that also exists in terms of science as well, and careers in science. So that can be a sort of a good way to get an opportunity to understand what happens in this type of sector quite early on, before sort of committing to doing a lot more studies. So yeah, lots of different routes, but I mean also like I would stress that you don't need, it seems that there might be a lot of pressure at a very early stage to decide what you want to do, and I definitely don't think that's the case. the skill sets that you need to work in science are so transferable across different areas, and also, you know, I would definitely be an advocate of exploring different things that you would like to do, and it's never too late to or too early to think about, you know, where you might want, and it's fine to change your mind. I actually, like Nicola, I actually started off looking at doing a chemistry degree, and then actually realized that I don't really like medicinal chemistry. And what I really got excited about was the impact of drugs on the body, and so I did a sort of U-turn whilst I was at university and changed degree, and that was difficult for me to make at the time, because I didn't know if I was making the right decision. But you know, I think there's no right or wrong decision. I think you just take the opportunities that you have and work with that. I don't know if anyone else has anything they might add around different routes.
I just echo the point about not having to know exactly what you want to do when you're 17, 18 years old, whatever you know. My degree isn't what I'm working in, but the things I learned have absolutely, you know, been really important in my career now, you know. Yeah.
Fantastic. So if we look at some of the skills that we think are important in to work in this area, we've probably talked about most of those. I think all these words are very, very important to us, and I guess, you know, from my point of view, it is determination and curiosity. They're my two things that I think are really important, that you need to really want to know what's going to happen and do the work to uncover the answers. So I think that's really important. Guys,
yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, you have to be determined, because quite, you know, as we've mentioned, lots of things fail. So you sort of have to have that persistence in the face of things going wrong. But I think for me, I also think creativity is important. I think you know, having that kind of drive to think in a different way or work with others thinking in a different way is really really kind of can help in science. I mean, I think, you know, I did quite a lot of experiments in my own kitchen at home, not scientific experiments, but food experiments. And I think that kind of is another creative outlet. And I think if you like sort of thinking about different ways of doing things, it can come out in all different ways. But I think having creativity is really helpful in the context of trying to solve problems and working with other people. Different ideas there's no wrong answers, there's no wrong ideas to test, that you never know what might come of that. So yeah, I think creativity is really important as well.
Yeah, and it's on the slide there, but communication is really important. If you've got a great idea, you need to be able to kind of communicate that to your colleagues and the wider community. And I think it's probably important to note that all these skills are important, but they're not like inherent qualities that you have. They're definitely things you can learn. You know, I definitely learned to improve in these things. Probably still can improve in lots of them, or definitely can. But yeah, communication is important, and teamwork too. It's definitely a team sport. You know, these are really complicated problems. Things fail often, as we've said. It's hard to create new medicines. You need to be able to work in teams, help each other out. Yeah, that's important.
Fantastic. So in the interest of time, we'll stop there. I'm sure we could talk for a lot longer, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you. If anyone has any questions, please type those into the chat. I will keep an eye on that. I was just reflecting, so the students who may be listening to this webinar, a lot of them will be doing IRIS research projects. So a lot of the skills around working as a team, being quite resilient and determined, I think they get quite an early look at how repetitive and sometimes frustrating lab work and other kind of research can be. You know, it's something you really have to be passionate about. Like you said, you have to really care about the results in order to follow that through. So I'm sure they're looking at that and thinking, oh yes. And communication is something we talk about a lot as well, because we run conferences in the summer for students to come and show their research off with their posters. So a lot of them will be starting to think about how to communicate the journey they've been on, the things that have worked, haven't worked, kind of their ideas for their next steps, depending how far through they've got. So yeah, it is hopefully a real life experience for those students, and replicates some of the experiences you have working in that field. I just wondered whether any of you have kind of a favorite or a most interesting disease or drug, I suppose, the medicines kind of that you have worked on, or that you think we will be seeing some work on in the future. I realize some of what you're working on is probably quite secret still, but if there's any kind of stories or case studies of things that you think are particularly interesting.
I mean, I can go. So I'm very passionate about the immune system and how we respond differently to different challenges in our environment. And something I find really interesting and worrying as well, I guess, is that, you know, allergies are on the rise. You know, basically one in two of us have an allergy to something, whether it's hay fever or food allergy. And even sort of 20 years ago, that number was much lower. And you know, we need to think of new strategies of how to deal with that. So I think understanding what's driving that change and that kind of increase in allergies, but also how we can, you know, combat that in developing new medicines, I think is really critical. Allergies might not be seen as a big disease as such. It's not sort of your cancer in the same way, but equally it has a huge impact on a lot of people's lives. So I think for me, I'm really passionate about looking for new medicines to really look at how we might treat that underpinning disease rather than just looking at the symptoms and how we might work with the symptoms. So that's something that I'm quite passionate about.
Thank you. Yeah, the way you describe thinking about treating symptoms and treating the disease itself. I mean, I've got a biology background, but I haven't ever thought about it in that way before. It's a really interesting, yeah, it's a really interesting question, isn't it? We have had a question come in around who your inspiration was when you were younger, if there were any kind of particular people you looked up to, and whether you have any particular inspirations now.
Rob, do you want to?
Yeah, I can jump in. I guess like several teachers really. Like if you have a really good teacher when you're a kid, I think that can be you know, really important. So we had like an excellent physics teacher, great maths teacher. Ended up doing physics, so you know it worked. I don't know if that was their intention, to get as many people to study physics as possible. I'm not sure if I can't really think of one I have now. I mean, it's just all my excellent colleagues at MDC, maybe, you know, very inspiring.
Very diplomatic answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So my the people that impress me now and inspire me are those people who give up their day job to set up a company to really push through an idea they've had to try and get a new medicine in the clinic. It takes years, it takes a lot of money, it's hugely risky. They try to develop the science, raise money, and the passion those people show are amazing, and it's so important because the pipelines of our compounds in the clinic, so anything that's in the clinic, potential new medicines, it's usually big pharmaceutical companies that have these big, expensive clinical trials, but more and more those pharmaceutical pipelines have been fed by these very small, innovative, risk-taking small companies that set up to just have a go at something really difficult. So that's what inspires me in this field.
Thank you. We've got one more question. I think we'll wrap up on this one. So do you have any interests outside of work that help you in your day-to-day?
I can
Yeah,
start.
go on,
Yeah, I like playing football, which maybe doesn't seem like it would translate to science, but I think it's good for like kind of conflict resolution. You know, people get quite angry at each other, get quite heated, kind of resolve those conflicts and then shake hands at the end of a game. It's kind of like a nice practice for any sort of tension you may, you know, experience in the workplace. Not that, you know, that happens very often, but, you know, kind of can help with that skill, I think.
Yeah, there's always going to be differences of opinion when you're working in a team together. So it's,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly,
it's
yeah.
you will experience. Yeah.
I have quite a few different hobbies, but some of the ones that I think give me different outlets are I do some silversmithing actually, so I do metalwork and make silver jewelry. So I think that's sort of a different way to look at a creative outlet. And I guess similar to Rob, I also really enjoy sports, so both running and yoga and things like that. So I think that those types of things, just a different way to, because it can be quite hard and intense thinking, using your brain all the time. It's nice to outside of work to think of different ways to sort of calm down from it, or take a step away from it and use your different aspects of your brain. So yeah, those are the things I enjoy.
Sounds like a good balance.
Yeah.
I did say we'd end on that, but we've had one more quick question, which is, do Medicines Discovery Catapult offer work experience?
Yes, we do.
Quick answer. Is there anything the schools might need to know about processes for that, or anything?
We do offer work experience. We don't have a standard how we do it, when we do it. So what would be important is just for schools to get in touch. Let's have a conversation and see what we can do to help.
Brilliant. That's what we like to hear. Well, thank you all so much for your time. It's been genuinely fascinating and really great to hear what you do. If anyone watching has any other questions they'd like to follow up with, you're welcome to email research. It's info@researchinschools, or ask your teacher to contact their main contact with us, and we'll be happy to follow up and share anything else with you. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.